Hello, dreamy people. Welcome back to the Writers Haven Show. I am your host, V Helena, and today my special guest is Yucel Ors. I'm so excited to have him here to talk about his wonderful book, Voices from the Past. Now, I'm a history buff, so this book really resonated with me. Imagine having an informal sit down with Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Alexander Hamilton, John Adams, James Madison, George Mason, John Jay, and John Marshall, all founding fathers, and you're sitting down to discuss their insights into the birthing of our nation and the intricate questions posed over the last 2 centuries. Well, that's what Yucel presents in his book with the help of AI. So now that I have gotten your attention, join me in welcoming Yucel to the Haven.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. I like I said, I'm a history buff, and I am totally fascinated by this book in so many ways. It's what you've written in it. It's how you put the book together, how you came up with the concept for it. But before we jump into the book,
Sure.
I want to talk about you, the author. Give me a little bit about your background. Let our audience know who you are.
So that's a very difficult question to answer sometimes,
I know.
Talking about yourself. But
Yeah.
Again, even sounding with my first name, it's a little different, as you can imagine. I was born in Turkey. My mother's American, my father's Turkish. And so when I was born there, I was there for 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And
In Turkey?
In Turkey.
Okay.
There was some issues with my father's company.
Mm-hmm.
There was a strike going on, and he was running the company, and there was some threats to the family. So my mother is like, we're moving back to the United States. So we came back to the United States, and my father got a job at University of Pittsburgh, Computer Sciences Division. And so it was a cultural change for me.
Yeah, and did that help to form, like going back to the first 7 years? I mean, I know that you're young at that age, but the things that were happening in your family's life, did that help to form some of your ideas about, not necessarily life in Turkey, maybe not, but help to form some of the ways that you thought about government and change and transitions? How did it form you?
Sure.
As a writer?
So politics has always been a major issue in my family. My father and I always had great conversations, sometimes heated conversations about politics. We don't always agree. My grandfather, who is an Episcopalian minister on my mother's side, very conservative in his beliefs. So there was a lot of differences in opinions in my family.
Cultural differences.
Cultural differences. Yeah. Again, my grandfather was Episcopalian, very conservative, very religious, whereas my father was more agnostic. So they had a lot of differences, and so that was always interesting. But I think just the dynamics made me a little bit more nuanced in the way I look at politics. I'm not driven by one side versus the other side. I'm more, pragmatic about what politics should be, the way people need to work together, and everything else.
Right.
So that really drove my passion into political science as I did my years in studies and everything else. Not until college did I really find that passion.
Okay, for politics.
For politics. I thought I was going to go into computer sciences like my dad.
Be a chip off the old block.
Yeah, and I thought I was also going to go into law. But political science, the study of politics, the study of government, the study of how people, democracy and everything else, really drove my passion. And one of my professors, who was my mentor, we used to have deep conversations about how different discussions persuade people's opinions and participation in politics and everything else. So
Yeah, different rhetorics, ideas, thought processes, and it really resonates in your book. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but there was something that you said that I really wanted to hone in on. So your mom is American, your father's from Turkey. That in itself presents certain beliefs that can resonate with you from a young child to the man that you are today. And so then you came into the United States, and you've been here ever since.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Between states, Florida being one of them, New Jersey I think was another.
Oh, I've been all up and down the East Coast, Virginia, Florida, New Jersey, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Boston, Massachusetts. Moved up quite a lot. I can't go back to Turkey because I have a dual citizenship. I'm a U.S. citizen born abroad, but because I was born in Turkey and my father's Turkish, I'm considered a Turkish citizen as well. If I go back there, they will put me in their military, and I decided, you know what, no, I'm good. I do have family there, but I don't think I will ever go there.
Going back to your writing of the book and how your background influenced your writing, at what point did you decide that you would write about, whether it be your experiences or things that you were seeing around you?
I was always passionate about writing. When I was in college, I did a number of papers and theses on international trade, trade blocks and everything else. I did a thesis on what are the driving forces of political change, economy and debt and everything else. But I was always passionate about being able to write books, and my passion was actually I wanted to eventually get my PhD, which I still might drive towards it, but I wanted to teach. I wanted to be a professor, but I also wanted to write books and everything else. So my goal was to do both of that. Unfortunately, when we talk about family, we talk about making sure that you can make ends meet. Sometimes you put your passions to the side. But
well, you know what? You kind of did that with this book, because it's an educational piece as well as a beautifully written book. And so let's just go ahead and talk about it.
No, I
Let's go ahead and
thank you.
talk about
I
it.
really, and I do. My focus was on education.
Yeah.
You know, we people have to understand what the founding fathers, what they were all about, and my goal was to educate them about what would they think about us today, knowing what they really drove them to create a new type of country that didn't exist ever before.
And they all had their own ideologies, and to have all of them come into a room, so to speak, and talk from that vein, that perspective, their ideology about the ails of life as we see it today, or the good things that are going on with us politically or otherwise, but just to get their opinion about what their thoughts are, if they were to come into our space today and opine and then discuss with us their thoughts about those issues. I want to go back a little bit and talk about where the genesis of writing this book came from. How did you get there?
So a lot of it came from the fact that in our current political dynamics, we hear a lot about what our founding fathers believed in the Constitution. So when there are questions about the Constitution means this, or the founding fathers believed this, my concern is we're interpreting it with our own biases. We all have biases. We all want to believe
that we don't.
Everybody supports that we don't have a bias, but that everybody supports what we believe in. And unfortunately, I think where we get confused or where we get a little bit aggravated is when people don't believe the way we. There's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm. They don't think like we do.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with having difference of opinions.
Mm-hmm.
Except for today, there's a lot of people who
are enraged, right?
Right. That if you don't believe the way they do, they stop talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a little bit concerning. So the way this book came about and the way I wanted to, as you mentioned, the Founding Fathers were not, they didn't all believe the same. Mm-hmm. They were very different in their opinions. Mm-hmm. But I always found a cigar lounge, and that's why it's set in a cigar lounge, is I go to cigar lounges across the country when I travel, but the one that I frequent here in Maryland, I've had many conversations with individuals of different political beliefs and like, and it's always been civil. You know, you're sitting there enjoying your cigar, enjoying your drink.
You're not taking it personally.
No, and it's a civil conversation. People disagree, but there's no aggravation. They're talking nicely to each other.
And so I want to pause for a second because I want to let our audience know that in this dialogue that you have in your book, you have to keep showing it, the setting is in a cigar lounge. And so our founding fathers are having drinks, maybe whiskey, some kind of dark, dirty liquor, and they are also smoking cigars. Is there any particular brand of cigar that they're smoking back in that day? Did they even have brands? Because tobacco was a big thing back then.
I don't know, but I'm assuming that they probably had pretty good tobacco at that time.
Yeah. Was there any state that did it better than another?
Virginia was
the best.
Yeah, okay. Virginia was a heavy tobacco plantation state. Mm-hmm. But I think again they smoking cigars at that time was just a normal everyday occurrence, and people's, so it was.
And so you took that setting based on your own experience and having those kinds of heated conversations about all kinds of subjects with people who were friends, people you didn't know, people who had just joined the conversation, but have done it civilly.
Yeah, no, and I think that's all a part of the debate process, that we should be able to talk to each other. I have to respect your opinions, no matter who you are and how you believe. I think we have lost that respect with each other. Yeah. I think when we start talking to each other and listening, it's not just talking at each other, but you have to listen to each other. I think you go so much further and being able to understand why people believe the way they do. As I said, you don't always have to agree with them, but you have to understand and respect them.
Right.
And that's how we come to compromises. And unfortunately, and some of the reasons I wrote the book is, that's my fear, is we're losing our ability to compromise.
So that was the genesis for your book. You kind of looked at what was going on, the rhetoric coming from all over the place, and you just felt that we're in a space where people are just not accepting to differences, and you wanted to find a way to bring that to the masses. Why the Founding Fathers?
Well, the Founding Fathers were very challenged. Again, they were not all unified in what they thought the new, writing of the Declaration of Independence was a treasonous act. The Constitution, the articles that are in the Constitution were well debated and everything else. So it took a lot for the Founding Fathers to put aside their differences and come together and unite around the cause of freedom and liberty and the pursuit of happiness and justice for everybody. So that those foundational principles that created that unity we have to, I guess what I'm trying to say is we have to find that again. We have seemed to have lost it. And we have been more divisive in the way we are. And it's just the more we divide, the more partisan we become, the harder it's going to be to find a solution that, unfortunately, our founding fathers created that foundation, but right now we're crumbling.
Yeah, and they're probably rolling in their grave at the thought of some of the challenges that we're facing, and also our interpretation of the Constitution, and whether or not their intention was as it is playing out now in the public discourse. So, okay. So I think we understand the genesis of why you wrote it, and using the founding fathers as the vehicle to express it. Now let's talk about how you actually put it together, your process for bringing those elements together.
So one of the things I didn't want to do is, again, put my biases into what the founding fathers would say to the questions I was asking. And a lot of the questions I asked in that are relative to a lot of the questions we ask of our current politicians about what their beliefs are on, let's say, our democracy, social media, on federalism and everything else. So I wanted to utilize, I know that our founding fathers, many of them, almost all of them, are well written, documented, their speeches are documented, their stories, their writings are well documented. A whole trove of information. But I think one of the things that AI gives us the ability to do is take all that information and be able to consolidate it and be able to do it without the bias, our personal biases, and give you the answer to those questions that you might be asking based on their writings. And that was my goal in doing this.
And I want to talk about that. You've raised wonderful, wonderful point about our biases and how AI takes that completely away, which is one of the controversies in using AI to write in literature, because it does take out the human element. It takes out the expression, the emotion. It's very raw, very surface. But I think for what you've created, it works. At least I feel that way. And did you know that? Well, first of all, do you agree?
Yes, I do.
And did you, going into it, know that the end product of what AI was going to bring to you was going to be satisfactory and on point with what you were looking for with this book?
I did not believe it. I the same way that you said it, I thought it was going to be a little bit drier and everything else, but as I went through that process of asking the question and then going through the process of back and forth with the AI to generate the answers and everything else, I was thrilled at the way it was coming back. I was thrilled at the way the responses were coming back, and what you could definitely see is the themes, or not themes, but how different perspectives of the founding fathers were coming through in the answers.
Yeah, and I want to just, for our audience, oh my gosh, I left my glasses in the in the control room. But I just want to, for our audience, just tell them some of the topics that you explore, or that our founding fathers explore, in helping you write this book. So you talk about the state of American democracy, social media and American politics, fair and free elections, ability of Congress to legislate, managing our economy, federalism and the balance of power between the federal government and the states, Religion and politics, legacy of slavery and race relations in American democracy, the Second Amendment, immigration, women's reproductive rights and rights to abortion, and other things that you touch on there. But the things that I mentioned are pretty hot topics.
I didn't want to shy away from anything. I didn't want, I know there's a lot of hot button issues in politics today, and I wanted to address them head on. Again, a lot of these issues many times comes back when we talk about abortion, when we talk about Second Amendment, they come back to, well, the Constitution said this, the Founding Fathers believe that. Well, why not ask them what do you believe about these things? What do you believe about the Second Amendment? What do you believe about immigration? Because we can say what we believe that they would believe, but I'd rather have it come straight from
their mouth, right?
Yeah.
So how did you decide who was going to talk about which topics?
Well, that's an interesting question, because when I first started the book, I was interviewing each founding father independently. And I did not think about doing all 9. But in my conversations with my fellow cigar smokers in the lounge, I got a lot of advice.
Did you want to do a shout out for the lounge?
The Davidas Lounge in Eldersburg. The guys are all out there, and I'm hoping that they all watch this.
They're cheering you on.
Yeah. They all gave me great advice, and what I would say is they told me, instead of interviewing them separately, have them sit in the cigar lounge and ask them the same question, and then let the debate come out. And so my goal was to ask each one of them the same question and see how they come back with those responses. That's one of the reasons why the book is probably longer than I expected it to be.
No,
but
this is a good size.
Yeah,
this is not too long. How many pages is it? Oh, it's only
over 300.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, it's
a solid book.
But
hardback.
And I think what you get out of it is, again, each one's perspective, and you're gonna have some founding fathers that might be your favorites, and some you might not care about.
So I want to dig more deeply into the AI process. So was it a situation where you had Alexa right there and you said, Alexa, what did our founding fathers say about and then she would come back with this flood of information? Was it something like that, or?
No, it was more the, I used the OpenAI, the ChatGPT, and not the free version. I used the one that is, you pay for it and everything else. But it would be asking the question, but you have to be very careful in how you phrase the question and the response you get. Because if you're not phrasing your questions correctly, AI is going to give you very different responses, and sometimes there's short responses, and sometimes it is not the response you're looking for.
Did you have to give it in chunks? Because, for example, so you are assuming the role of the moderator,
right?
Because I noticed you said, oh gosh, I did not highlight exactly. Yes, I did. I'm sure I did. Okay, so John Adams was sitting to your right, and Thomas Jefferson to your left. Thomas Jefferson being one of my favorites. But anyway, you sat in the role as moderator. Did you, so like for example, that's a lot. So was it a situation where you plugged into AI the complete moderator dialogue, and then whatever came out is what you then gathered?
Yeah, so I would put in that question, and then again, my goal was to generate from each one of them, based on their writings, a response to that question. So what I would do is, for each one to respond to the question, I'd have to ask that question over and over again to each of the individually.
Okay.
And then group it all together, and then once that's been grouped together, then if you notice at the end of each question, there's a short debate between the founding fathers and a discourse. It's to show that they're not always going to be in agreement, but there's a conversation. And, you know, that conversation can go on, keep going on each one of these issues. It is definitely not the final.
So then you had to kind of choose what you were going to put in the book based on what came back.
Yeah, and so it was an ongoing process, and it's what I would say is anybody who is looking to utilize AI is a tool. It's not your end-all, be-all, and you got to be very careful.
What is your advice to someone who is looking to use AI as a means to write a book on whatever topic they plan on doing?
I say start with experimenting. Start small. Start with just getting some ideas and concepts and putting it together. Put a framework together on what you're trying to achieve before you start, so you know where you're trying to get to. Sometimes that's not always achievable, but I think if you start with the proper framework, be ready to make changes, because it's not going to always go the way you want it to go. And you're going to have to make it engaging.
Now, you're also a first-time author, published. What is your advice in general for anyone who is looking to go into the literary world, whether it's with AI at your side or not?
It takes a lot of work, a lot of commitment. What I would say is it's an interesting industry. I had to do a lot of learning and research, not just on doing the book, but on how to get it published, on where to get it published, how to promote it. And I'm only in the beginnings, and I am so grateful to having you give me this opportunity to be a part of the show.
My pleasure.
But it's all of that is, I know experienced authors know exactly what to do.
The business of writing.
It's very complicated.
Yeah, can be.
And there's some negatives to it too, that you have to be ready for.
Yucel Ors, thank you so very much for being on the show. I absolutely appreciate your time and your talent. And thanks for tuning in to the show, Dreamcatchers. I hope you gathered some very important tips from today's discussion with Yucel on the use of AI in your storytelling, and definitely run out to pick up his books. It is sold wherever books are sold. Stay tuned for more programs highlighting the art of writing for literature, music, television, film, and theater. And for information on how to catch our show on streaming and broadcast channels, go to www.writershavenshow.com. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, catch fire on purpose.